And there we go. Hi, everybody. Thank you all for coming and joining me. And as you can see, I have a special guest with me today. Mark Robbins is here, and we're going to be talking all things email. So yeah, thanks. There's already a bunch of people here, so I guess it's a topic people are interested in. Before we dive into the big thing, I'll let you introduce yourself a little bit, Mark, and let everyone know who you are and what you're up to.
Yeah, cool, thanks. So yeah, thanks a lot for having me on. It's always great to chat about email. I'm one of those strange people who really enjoys working with email and writing email, HTML and CSS. I know a lot of web folks try and avoid it, but for me, it's a joyous thing to do. So I work at Salesforce. I'm a software engineer there, and I work on some of the stuff within the content builder. So it's like their drag and drop editor for creating email. I'm also a member of the AMP for Email working group. So AMP for Email is like this relatively new extra MIME type, so it sits alongside your plain text email and your HTML email. And I am a co-founder and co-admin of the brand new Email Markup Consortium, which launched last week, I think it was. So that's exciting things that are happening in email.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much. I just realized I have to make one little change here. So things are going to get weird for a second. Let's just switch this to everything email. There we go. And jump back to here. Perfect. That's better.
That makes more sense. Yeah.
I thought I'd updated the title everywhere, but apparently I'd forgotten one of the places. So sorry about that. Yeah, so I'll be honest, for me, email stuff's always been intimidating or maybe not intimidating, but I've sort of avoided it. Even like I have my own newsletter that goes out and I use ConvertKit for it, but like even, you can write your own template to use, and I'm just like, nope, I'm just going to go as plain text as possible on this and make my life a little bit easier. Because it does seem to be one of those things that can often be more challenging, I guess, and is very different from the rest of the world of development.
Yes.
So first, Code Freaky Daddy, thank you very much for the sub. I appreciate that. And Adrian saying, Mark, I really enjoy creating HTML emails. Me, you're a sick man. So yeah. I think for a lot of people that's a bit of a common sentiment, but I wonder, do you think it's mostly because it's something like when you see people that are frustrated with writing emails or creating, custom emails and stuff like that, and coding them up, do you think it's because it's just something they don't do all the time, or is there a bit more to it?
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that people often get thrust on their plate when they've got a lot of other things happening, and it's, oh, could you do this quickly? And you're used to working on web, and you try and use your web sort of ideas in email, and it doesn't work. So you do need to think about it differently. It's a very specialist skill, and it's very separate from web. And I think that's where a lot of frustration comes from, is because asking people to do something they're not familiar with. You do need to think about things differently. There's a lot of resources around it now. They didn't used to be, but now there's a lot more to help you out with it. But that takes time to look into, to read up on it, to learn all the differences, the little quirks. It takes a while to pick these things up. So it's one of those things. If you jump into it suddenly, everything goes wrong. So it's I think it's undervalued as well, because it is a specialist skill, and ideally, in an ideal world, you hire somebody specialist to work on the email side of things, which I think a lot of web developers would like as well, so they don't have to do it. So but it's don't always get these options and the funding for these bits, I guess.
It's funny hearing you say a lot of that, because it does, I specialize mostly in CSS, and I feel the same way when it comes to that, that it's sort of this niche thing that's different from how a lot of, the other stuff that people are doing, and they get often that frustration is because it's different. So we're sort of going into it's a smaller niche even than my own, where a specialty I think is even more useful than with CSS. I'm just gonna interrupt quickly just to say for anyone who's in the chat, I just wrote it, but if you do have any questions, if you just do an exclamation point question and then ask a question, it'll collect it for us and we can sort of get to those questions later. It might also work with the exclamation point queue, but I haven't used the collector in a while, so I don't remember if it works with that or not. But yeah, we'll sort of collect the questions and I'll keep an eye on them as well to make sure we get to them. But I think a little bit to what you were just saying, Mo the dev said, I did some HTML email development work at my previous job, and they found it to be a nightmare to make sure it looked good on all email clients. So yeah, I think as you said, like it's thrust onto people, and then they're sort of if you don't know all of the nuance of it, it's a bit of a nightmare, I think.
Yeah, like for me, I really enjoy that. I enjoy that side of it. The little the puzzle solving, I think, is something that I enjoy in, I suppose, different areas of life as well. And it's you fix this thing and it breaks something else. Now that's very frustrating to a lot of people, but some people that's very intriguing. And I think it takes a certain type of person, I guess, to find that intriguing, want to dig into it more and understand why these things are happening. But yeah, it's that side of it that appeals to me a lot, I think.
Yeah, it does make me think a little bit of the earlier days of web development, not
Yeah.
just in the tools that you need, but just even with like the browser inconsistencies. That people still today we still like to complain that there's inconsistency between the browsers, or this is supported here and not supported there yet. But I think anyone these days who's complaining of that doesn't maybe realize how bad it used to be, and I think it's even exaggerated more once you get into all the different email clients that are out there.
Yeah, and then a lot of, particularly when you're looking at webmail clients, then you've got the browser rendering on top of that as well to take into consideration. So Gmail on Safari compared to Gmail on Chrome or Gmail on Firefox is going to be very slightly different in those terms. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a nightmare. I mean, I guess on that topic, just what type of solution? Actually, before we get into that, maybe there was. Let's just go to my questions page. Oh, it's a little bit small, but I can make it bigger on my end at least so I can see it. So the first one is, if somebody is just getting started with emails, what's a good place to get started to be aware of all of these constraints and all if someone was brand new, they're in that situation, they're at their job, and their boss says, let's do it. You need to create us an email. What's the first place they should go to?
There is a really, really good Slack community, which is if you go to email.geeks.chat, I think is the URL, and that will take you to the sign up page. You can sign up there, and then there's a huge, I think it's about 15,000 people in that channel at the moment, and it's a pro channel as well, so the messages are all stored. Get into there, and then there's different channels for everything from code, which I'm always in the code channel. There's accessibility, there's design, there's strategy, marketing, deliverability, all kinds of things. So all the areas of email, and it's very, very collaborative atmosphere in there, very friendly group of people as well. And just drop in and ask questions there is that's the first thing I'd say go to. Also, there's a website, Email Resources, which I think is emailresource.es or something like that. Let's see if I can find it. Yeah, email resource.es. So email resources, but with a dot between the E and S.
Yep, got it.
Which lists lots of different tools, lots of different things on there. So that's a really, really useful place to look. And if you look on there, then you'll find that links out to the Slack community. It links out to every website that you ever want, every resource. It's very, very useful to look on there, I think. Is
cool.
Those are the two main things to get started. And if you're on Twitter, put the hashtag emailgeeks and ask a question, put that hashtag, and you'll get an answer from somebody within the community. And again, lots of knowledgeable people, and everyone's very willing to help out because, as you say, it's a very tricky area. So it makes the community stronger because we're all facing these issues. So it's a great place to help each other out.
Awesome. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I guess once you've when you've suffered, you can hopefully help other people not have to suffer as much as you.
Exactly.
Let's just see. I think there was another question, so we'll go see what it was. Oh, does this work? It did work. Okay, so you can just do the, the dot or exclamation point Q and then ask a question if you do have one. So the next thing, actually, you sort of derailed me a little bit there, but I heard you mention there's a channel for accessibility within email, and for me, just in the web, that's something that I've been trying to focus more on myself. And I'm curious, just I guess we'll go a bit more into the weeds a little bit. So in that front, is there any low hanging fruit or like the very basic things instead of getting into like the nitty gritty of like the final optimizations, but like the general things people should take into account that first time they're worrying about making emails or designing emails?
So yeah, accessibility. There's a lot of overlap with web and with other things as well. So thinking about getting good contrast, getting good text size, get good descriptive alt text, good descriptive link text. All of that is very important. And it's just important in email. So definitely look at all of that. One thing a lot of people avoid is using semantic elements in email. That like you can use H1 to H6, they're fine. Use them, use your paragraph tags, use your lists, all of that. Just get those in. So you have some hierarchy, you have some structure. It makes it a lot easier to navigate using assistive technology. Another thing, if you're using table layouts, which a lot of people do, adds the role attribute and role presentation or role none onto all the tables. Just needs to go onto the table element. You don't need to do it on every TR and TD and everything like that. So just put on every table that isn't a data table, add role presentation or role none. Does the same thing. And that will tell assistive technology that this is not a data table. Treat this as normal. Now, there's not every email client respects that role, but most of them do these days. So that will then pass along to the assistive technology. Also, the assistive technology is getting better and recognizes quite often when something is a display table and not a data table. So that can help to some extent, but still it's important to add that in. I think those are the main things to get started. But also just understanding that although we're using HTML and the same basic ideas of HTML and CSS carry through into email, so it's good to use relative font sizing. Not many people do yet. I'm pushing people to do that more. So there's things like that, but there's certain things like it's good on web to use a main element in a page, every page having a main element, but only one. So then if you put it into your email client and that email is then opened in an email app or in a webmail, there's a good chance there's already a main element there and it's repeated. So it's little things like that which are the differences which can catch you out. There is some good tooling around that as well. There's a tool called Parcel, which is parcel.io, which is a online email coding tool. It's just basically a code editor, but specifically for email. They've got an accessibility checker built in to that on the free plan as well, which will run a test on your accessibility and specifically for email. So it will pull out things like that. If you're using a main tag, it will say not an email. So it's really useful tool for that.
That's cool. I actually saw somebody was asking questions when I posted on Twitter that I'd be doing this later today. They asked 2 or 3 questions, and then all of a sudden they said, "I just found Parcel, and it answered all my questions." And I was like, "Oh, good."
It's amazing. It's a relatively new. I think it came out beta I think less than a year ago, and it's had a huge impact on the industry already. So and there's a free plan on there. So yeah, I recommend signing up and trying it out.
Nice, cool. That just talking about tables and all of that, it does make, I think part of the reputation at least is for writing HTML emails is that it's a lot like making a page in the 90s and sort of going back. Is that a misconception? Is there some truth to it?
Yes, it's a misconception. Yes, there's some truth to it. So if you're opening an email, if you're sending an email to Apple Mail, either on desktop or on iOS, essentially it's Safari without JavaScript. You can do all kinds of things. I've built like 3D games that you can do, like 3D CSS, you can do animation, you can do loads of really cool stuff, and all in just CSS, and it works in Apple Mail. The one thing is viewport height units get a bit messy because of the way it's built, but other than that, it's really, really like good. On the other end of the scale is Outlook, and the MSO version of Outlook, or like Microsoft Office version, which is the desktop app on Windows. That uses Microsoft Word as a rendering engine.
Oh no.
Exactly. And that is the reason, and the only reason, why people use tables to build email. It's only for that one email client, or sort of, and generations of that one email client. Outlook mobile apps, Outlook webmail, Outlook progressive web app, Outlook on the Mac, all have much, much better HTML rendering and work really well. So it's just Outlook on Windows desktop, which is causing us to use table layouts. The good news on that front is there is a new project, which was Project Monarch, but I think it's One Outlook, it's called, which is the newest version of it. And that is replacing the desktop app with a progressive web app. And that will have better rendering. So it's just, I guess it'll be a waiting game to wait until people stop using Outlook 2019. And I still see people using Outlook 2007, so it might be a while.
It's sort of, Microsoft seems to be at the heart of these, from the IE6 being the thorn in everyone's side for the longest time, and even until Edge went Chromium, I think they were driving everybody nuts. So they've kept their reputation going on the email front.
Very much so.
It's always good at least seeing progress, even though it does. It's a bit of a waiting game, as you said. After, even once that switch has been made, you're still sort of holding out. On that, is there, even now, looking at like a lot of the new stuff that's coming for CSS in the web, you sort of look back, and I saw even, I use caniuse.com a lot. Someone put in the chat, can I email, as sort of an equivalent for what is available in emails. But I always talk about progressive enhancement, and like, sometimes this doesn't work in Safari, but it doesn't break the layout, or the person's still getting something serviceable that is okay, it's just not as good. Is that something that you guys practice?
Yeah, very much so. I always look at it as make something functional. Make sure it, because there's so many different email clients, it's impossible to test all of them, but we test as many as you can, and make sure your email is functional in all of those email clients. And a big part of that is accessibility. Make sure if you're using the right, hitting your accessibility standards, you're probably going to be pretty functional in a lot. And then we add the enhancements. So yeah, you can do a lot of, like, even something like a border radius. It doesn't work in MSO Outlook. It doesn't work in, I think, WebDE, which is a German email client. And GMX as well, I think, is another one where it doesn't work. But then you just have square corners. It's not a big deal. But a lot of people worry about that and put in a lot of time and effort to, put in images of rounded bits to make it look like it's rounded. Or using VML, which is vector markup language, which you can use. It's sort of like a predates SVG as one of the influences of SVG, and that works in Outlook, so we can use it there. But that's a lot of effort to go to. I think just make it functional, and if you've got time, you can then start adding these progressive enhancements. But that's definitely something that I strongly recommend doing.
Yeah, that's when you need like an 8-pixel round border radius on something. It's not worth, if a few people don't get that, I don't think they're going to notice. So you'll be fine.
It's fine.
Yeah. But I mean, I see the same thing come up all the time whenever I'm talking about anything, and they're like, "Oh, the browser doesn't, this one browser doesn't support that, or something," and I'm like, and that doesn't change the experience at all. It's just a
Yeah,
little touch or whatever. Yeah, it can be frustrating.
it's just making sure the fallbacks work is the key thing
Yes,
there. And
yeah,
as you
exactly.
say, like, Can I Email is a brilliant website for that. It lists so much, and I use it all the time just to reference like what we can and can't use, and where things are likely to break and where things are likely to work. So that's yeah, definitely worth checking that out.
And I guess on that topic, you mentioned trying to test in as many clients as you can. Is it a little bit like with there's the memes and out there and stuff where you might have like 36 old devices lying around to be trying to test on everything? I know for the web, there's services too, like Browser Stack. Um, is there obviously testing on actual devices is the best case scenario, but is there services or other things out there that can make testing a little bit easier?
Yeah, so the main ones that do it, there's a company called Litmus and another one, Email Acid, and both very similar. They work, and you can send an email to an address. So once you register an account, then you have an address, and you send an email directly to that address, and it will open it in. I think they're pretty similar. I think they've both got 90 to 100 different email clients, and you'll get a screenshot of all of them. Also, you can just go in and you can. They've got code editors, so you can just paste your code in and do it from there, and make a little change, hit refresh, and it'll send it again. Make a little change, hit refresh, and it'll send it again. And yeah, I think they've got something like 90 to 100 different email clients in each of those, and that will give you a static screenshot of each one of them. So it's really good. It's really good for testing en masse. But as you say, live testing is key, and quite often we see updates coming in email clients. I know recently the Outlook app on, I can't remember if it was Android or iOS, did an update, and then which changed a few things. So right then, in the Slack channel, a lot of people talking about it, came up with a workaround. Everyone was using that. A couple of days later, they did an update, changed things again. So we go back in, start talking about it again, work out another thing, and that things like that happen all the time, and it's tricky. So yeah, using one of these services to test en masse is essential, really. And then for fine tuning bits, if you can test yourself on live devices, it's a lot of email. There's free webmail sign-ups you can do,
Mm-hmm.
so that's really useful. But also get involved in the community, and people can help with these things quite a lot as well, and help with workarounds and help find these bugs and explain what's happening and why things might be happening.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, that the Litmus, looking at their page now, it reminds me a little bit of Browser Stack, but just to like
Yeah,
with a million more options. That amount of clients is intimidating. Just to like be like, oh yeah, it should work in all of these. You're just like, oh my goodness. Just a really fast. Mike just resubbed. Thank you very much, Mike, for that. 8 months now. That's impressive. Thank you. Um, we'll jump over and see if there's any other questions. Um, how do you approach plain text versions of email with many visual items?
so plain text generally, what most people do is it generates from the HTML version. So you design the HTML version, and then it will generate the plain text version. I think there's space in that for innovation in that side of things, that because generally it'll just pull the text out and put it in, but we can lay things out in a bit more of a creative way. But yeah, generally you'll take that, it'll strip all the text out of the HTML email, put it into a plain text, and then go through and manually review it and just slightly adjust the layout. But yeah, it's a little bit of a manual process, but it's good to do that when you're finished with the HTML, because otherwise you go back and you change the HTML, and then either the change doesn't reflect in the plain text side, or it'll reset it all, so all your changes are lost. So it's make sure you get your sign off from the HTML first, and then go into tidy up the plain text version.
It sounds like you've had that happen to you a couple of times.
Yeah.
The big Dave is asking, how do you embed images when there's no local file structure?
So you would have like the full length URL. So quite often, most of the time, I'd say, when people are sending email, it'll be done through an email service provider. And when you creating your email there, you'll upload your images to that ESP, and if you're using a drag and drop editor, it'll give you those links, and you can just drag the images directly in, and it will create those links. So yeah, you're using a full length path to that image.
Mm-hmm.
You can also use other sort of, image server, or host it on your own website, or however you have it set up. But yeah, that's how we would do it in email.
Cool. So yeah, I guess something like even like Cloudinary or something, if you're rolling your own solution, should work.
Yeah, I've used Cloudinary quite a bit for like things that I've sent for my personal projects.
Right. Yeah.
It's really good for that.
And last one for now is, when coding, how do you know when to use ghost tables?
So I should probably explain what ghost tables are first.
Yeah, that's a good place to start.
So if you remember back in the olden days, when you're working with IE, if you had conditional comments for Internet Explorer, we have conditional comments for Outlook. So you can use, instead of if IE, use if MSO. So you can put a comment around a bit of code, and it'll render as a comment in most email clients, but Outlook will render it as code. So the way we can do that is we can open a table, and then so put a conditional comment inside that, a table, TRTD, opening tags, and then further down you put all those closing tags. So when to use them, for me, it's every single layout table I will use them for. Now there's pros and cons of that approach, because the reason we use tables is because Outlook won't respect setting a width on a div. So everything will go full width, and that looks terrible. So you want to set a fixed width in your email. So you put a table with a width of 600 is generally the standard 600 pixels wide table, and then now you've got 600 pixel wide email. You can set it to max width 100%, so make it responsive, which is good. But tables cause a lot of bugs in email clients, and so I find, from an accessibility point of view, particularly, but also just from a rendering point of view, hiding all the tables as ghost tables and just using div layouts for every other email client, that's what works best for me. The criticism people have on that technique is, so you set your table, you set your styles on that table, and then you set a div, and you set the styles on the div, and you're just repeating yourself. And I see that as I get that is an issue. The way I work around that is certain things like your font styling that can go on the div, because that will work in Outlook, that will inherit down. But it's just so I use tables for setting a fixed width, setting a background, or setting columns. I see people using tables for a lot of other things in email, but it's not needed, and it just bloats the code and causes bugs. Right. So for me, I would say everything that isn't a data table should be a ghost table, but I'll point out other people will disagree on that and have other coding styles, which and it's just finding what works for you, I think, is the main thing as well.
Right, cool. That's interesting. Yeah, I haven't been in the email world, so I hadn't heard about that. But it's kind of nice to know that you can work around and sort of only deal with the tables when you have to for the for dealing
Yeah.
with that one situation. Um, Actually, and I guess on that front a little bit, is there anything that you just completely avoid at all costs and just say it's not worth doing, or that might be possible, but it's just the headache is too much or just doesn't work, that maybe people don't realize early on and then run into problems with?
Yeah, that's I'm trying to think actually, that because I really like pushing things as far as I can. I don't avoid much, um, but it's things that cause, yeah, things. Some things can cause issues. Um, I think it's about time management. I think is the main thing, and priorities. As I said before, make sure it's functional first, then add your progressive enhancements. And as you're adding your progressive enhancements, make sure everything's functional, make sure everything's accessible as well, and slowly add these bits. So you can do some really quite wild and wonderful things in email, some incredibly advanced things that you can do, but it's about having the basics down first, and it's time management. Um, there's not much that I suppose I've given up on when I've been trying to do. Usually, I mean, it can take months to get something working, but that's more sort of the experimental side project things rather than anything I'd ever send in a campaign.
Right. Yeah. um, just before we have your actually, where was it? I think it was Mark Boots saying that he doesn't understand why there's no standard for email clients. So we'll be sort of talking about that in a second. But before we get to that, I just want to mention you brought up a lot of really good resources, and you also have the website goodemailcode.com.
Yes.
Yes. So I just put that in the chat. Just curious about sort of the, what people can find there and the types of resources and stuff or why you created it in the first place too.
Yeah, so that's my website that I put together, launched it a few years ago now. Really, it started as a place to share my notes. There's a lot of things that ideas and things that I come up, and it's like, oh, let me try this. Oh, how does that work again? I can't quite remember. So just so we've got some basic things like, what's your basic template look like? And then line by line, I go through the code that I use and explain what every part of it does and what email clients need it. So as things change, and as say there's something that's needed specifically for Yahoo push an update that's not needed anymore, I can then retest it and say, okay, I don't need that, and I can remove it. Because before this, a lot of the stuff I had, and a lot of the stuff that other people had as well, and just a lot of the resources, it's here is a big chunk of code, and this will fix your problem.
Right.
So I really wanted to break it down into a line by line to explain exactly what everything's doing, and how to, and what we can do, why everything's needed. So I've got it. There's in three sections. I've got sort of the basics, which are things like your container, your templates, your text, using horizontal rule and things like that, which you might have. Then I've got some enhancements where we've got some more experimental stuff. Got things like faux absolute position. So position absolute doesn't work in a lot of email clients, but we can work around that by setting a div with a max height 0 and a max width 0, and then putting something inside that with margin and offsetting it with margins. So it's sort of little hacky workarounds like that. So it's more, this is sort of more for the experienced email developer, where you can sort of learn a bit more about some of these things. And then the third section I've got is about accessibility, where I talk a bit more, like I've got something like, the using rem and m units in email works. The m units work everywhere, and it's really good. Rem units don't work everywhere, but So we can use M units, but we take that user set value, and we can still respect the user preference and font size.
Okay.
That's an interesting one though, because in web browsers, the default font size across the board seems to be 16 pixels.
Mm-hmm.
Email, it goes from 12 to 17 pixels, so it varies a lot more. So 12
Oh,
pixels
you have the whole
is,
table. Nice.
yeah, 12 pixels is not a very good font size. So if the user hasn't made any changes on Apple Mail on the desktop app, then everything's in 12 pixels. So we can work around that by putting using the max selector, and so we'll say font size max 16 pixels 1 rem. So that's so then
Yep.
if it's if they have the default 12 pixels, it will render text as 16 pixels. If it's anything higher than 16, then it will render the user's preference. So there's lots of little workarounds and little like quirks and things like that that we have. Also, where like 1 rem doesn't work, we can use font size medium, which effectively does the same thing, but also it doesn't get overwritten if somebody sets font size on the root in the
Yeah.
CSS.
Yeah.
Font size medium won't get overwritten. So that's a sort of workaround there. Although I believe the spec has changed recently, so it's not required that it works that way anymore. So as you can see, there's a lot, is a big sort of like mind dump of ideas and thoughts that I put into this.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully it's useful for people. I use it so much. I think that's sort of the best thing about it, is because there's so much to remember, so many little quirks, little workarounds. I use my own website so much as a reference because it started out as my notes.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, yeah, and it continues as my notes to do all these things. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's awesome that you're sharing your notes. You're using them for yourself, but it's awesome that it's a public resource that other people can learn from, and it's not just sort of stuck in your own little private Notion doc or something like that. And yeah, it's always awesome
Yeah,
when things
it's
are public.
also the process of writing it helps me as well, because I write it out and then I was like, oh, why did I put that bit in? And
Yeah,
then actually, can I remove it? And or oh, where does it break if I remove it? Or what? Or does it not? Does it work without that extra little style that's in there or extra line of code? So it's a lot of things like that helps me understand and improve my code as I'm writing it. And I think that's one of the good things. I think is when you're learning to code, one of the best things you can do is to try and write it out, or present it in a talk, or just like, yeah, trying to share your ideas. And if you can explain why, then I think that helps you understand why as well a lot more.
yeah. I always anything I'm doing now, I'm always recommending people to do that, whether even if it's for your own note taking. But I do encourage sort of sharing in public, whether it's just a blog. Maybe nobody's visiting it; it's just there in case it could help somebody.
Yeah.
But the connections you make when you're trying to explain something versus just sort of knowing about it and having used it, it's two completely different things. It's an amazing how much more comfortable you become with the code you're writing already, and understanding it. You make deeper connections when you have to explain something.
Yeah, I surprised myself by how true that is. What you said, I think it really does. It really does make a difference.
Yeah, it's super useful. Um, And then, so I mean, you have that going, but now, more recently, and this sort of goes back to what Mark was asking about standards. You've been involved in getting the email markup consortium off the ground. So I'll throw this in the chat so people can check it out in a bit more detail. But do you want to let us know a little bit about what this is? And
Yeah, so I mean, the short answer is we're trying to get email standards, which would be amazing. The slightly longer answer, I guess, or very much longer answer, because I tend to ramble on about it. So it started as a conversation in the Email Geeks Slack group that I mentioned before. Somebody asked, like, just fed up with things. Why aren't there standards? What can we do? Like, just this desperate thought that goes through every email developer's head of like, why? What can we do to fix things? And it led into a conversation. We jumped onto a phone call, talked about it a bit, and decided, well, we should try and do something about it. There's been a number of projects before. There was the fixoutlook.org was a website, which I don't think is there anymore. Emailstandards.org. There's W3C working group or community group rather, sorry, around email markup. There's a partnership between Litmus and Microsoft to try and fix some things with Outlook. And so all these things have come and sort of fizzled out. And so when we set this group up, we were looking at all these other projects, and like I think one of the first things we looked at is, can we resurrect one of these, or can we jump on board one of these? And we decided to start something new because we wanted to start it from the ground up with longevity built into it, and openness and community and collaboration. And so the idea is, when I retire, then it's still there, it's still going. And so how are we going to get the standards is a big question. But I suppose the first question is, why is there so much inconsistency? So we all have, like, every email client faces the same issue of security, privacy. And a simple example would be, if I send you an email and you open it in your email client, and I've just positioned a link just off to the side outside of the email preview that you're reading, and it's just sitting over your marker's spam button, and you click that and it'll take you to a website, and then all kinds of nasty things happen. So that's like a simple example of something nasty that people can do. And you can do that by using position, by using negative margins, by all kinds of different hacky CSS things. So every email client faces that issue, and they need a solution for it. They all have the same issues, they all have different solutions. And that's why we have so many inconsistencies, is because these solutions are always different. So one way we're trying to tackle that is we're trying to talk to email clients and saying, can we work together? Can we get this to work on agreed solutions, on shared solutions? You look at the way the browsers share rendering engines and the technology behind it. Can email clients do the same? So that's the sort of the big goal. But alongside that, we're running a number of other projects which just generally help. I think if email developers send better quality code, then that means it's easier for the email clients to do more things. If ESPs generate better quality code, and quite often when you upload your code to an ESP to send it out to your mailing list, that ESP might make some changes to your code, because again, they have these same concerns. They have the same, like, oh, we're worrying about security, we're about privacy. And also they might be worrying about the rendering and say, oh, we don't think that will work in email. So, well, it does, because I've tested it, but they don't think it does. So then they can mess with the code before it's sent out. So there's so many things that, so many touch points where stuff can get changed and messed around with. If we all work to the same level of standards, the same idea, we all have the same goals, so we should be able to agree on these. Then hopefully we can get it better. So as well as targeting the email clients, a lot of times when we talk about it, it's like, why can't Gmail do this? Why can't Outlook do that? Without taking any responsibility ourselves as developers. So we can do some things as well. So we've got a number of projects on the go. One which we've got started recently, and I think we're going to have a blog post about going out some point soon, is we're starting to collect data on emails. to use in a number of projects. So the one which I'm very excited about is an accessibility report. So it'd be similar to like the WebAIM million reports, if
Mm-hmm.
you're
Mm-hmm.
familiar with that, which looks at like the top million homepages and runs an accessibility check on all of them, and it says, who's doing well, who's doing badly, looks at general trends. We want to do that for email. The idea came from actually the team at Parcel. I don't work for Parcel, but I do keep talking about them because I like what they're doing. They ran a report using, when they launched their new accessibility checker, they ran a report on 6,000 emails. Out of those 6,000, 50% had at least one critical issue, and out of those 6,000, only 2 emails passed without issue,
Oh wow.
which is pretty bad state of things. So I got talking with Avi, who's the founder of Parcel, and like, we should do this on a bigger scale. So yeah, the team over there, they've built a way of collecting emails. So I think we're about sort of 9,000 emails we've collected now, and we're just sort of building up these emails from all different industries all around the world to try and get a huge data set, and we can run reports on, and so we can give an idea of how bad things are, and also understand from, because one of the main things we want to educate people and try and improve things, so we can understand what are the common mistakes people are making and how quickly we can fix them. And okay, we can see a lot of people are doing this or aren't doing this. We can focus our time on telling people, right, this is the main thing everyone needs to focus on. Because something like getting people to add role presentation on tables. When I started looking into accessibility probably around 2015, didn't see that anywhere. And now probably the majority of the code I see, people are doing that. It's because the email community is very good at sharing knowledge, particularly when it's simple things like that. It's very good. So that's one of the projects we're doing. Another one is an email platform status, which was built with the team at Tilt Studio and Remy Parmentier. So they're the people behind Can I Email as well. And so that's looking at what elements people are using. So how many people are using tables? Okay, probably most. How many people are using an H1? Like that, hopefully we would see pretty close to 100%. But I don't know if it will be that high. And so looking at things like that as well. So there's lots of little projects of sides like that which we're doing, and so many more. So keep an eye on the blog and the Twitter, and if anybody's interested in joining, come and join us, or just go onto the GitHub as well and suggest a new projects if you want to. There's there's so much that we can do, and the goal is really to sort of spread it wide, and we're not rushing things. We're taking our time. This is a big project, and there's and we'll have full-time jobs that we're those just working on it. So we're taking our time. We're moving slowly, but we are trying to make some real change happen in the email world, and hopefully, I'm positive about it, but hopefully we'll see something happening soon.
Yeah, I think a lot there. Sorry, 1 second. And I do think that obviously it's, as you said, there's all these people that are finding their own solutions to something. It seems a little bit silly when you're all solving the same problem. Why is everyone reinventing the wheel? But I also think it sounds like the idea that you have with, you're going after the low-hanging fruit first and not trying to reinvent the wheel from, we're going to set this new standard that everyone should follow, that nobody's doing anything like this yet. Probably you hit a bit more friction than if you try and slowly go about it and tackle certain issues first that are more problematic than others. So just, I mean, you'd mentioned it and I had it on screen for a second. Whoop. Oh, wrong button. There we go. But just when you did mention there was a lot of other attempts at having standards that sort of fell by the wayside, most of them quite old. Just out of curiosity, and I know like even here it does mention a bit of, it's sort of broken down in the blog post, which I'll put in the chat for anyone who wants to take a look at it in a bit more detail. But maybe here you sort of outlined why, or the steps in the direction that you guys plan on taking to try and make sure that it's something that can survive and that doesn't run into the issues. Do you know why some of those other ones didn't take off, or what led to them dying?
Um, I don't know. I don't have sort of direct contacts with many of the people involved, um, but I think, but sort of our hypothesis around it and what we're trying to do differently is a lot of these things they were closed off. It was a small group of people or a company or something like that trying to do one specific thing, and if those people lose interest or don't have the time to put into it anymore, it dies off. If they don't make any progress, and if they're targeting one thing and they don't make much progress, it gets very demoralizing very quickly.
Yeah.
So everything we're doing is open source. Everything's up on GitHub. We post our meeting notes every fortnight. When we have our meeting, we post the notes up on our GitHub, so it's everyone can see. We're very transparent. So you can see that even though it might not look like there's a lot going on, you can see that there is still activity. We are open. Anybody can apply to be a member. And then we've got 3 admins currently. It's myself, Hussein Ahmed, and Alice Lee. And we have said, we're currently the admins. Every 6 months, we'll have a vote to have new admins. So if you're not happy with the leadership, vote us out, vote other people in. Hopefully not. Hopefully you're happy. Hopefully everyone's happy with what we're doing. But so we're keeping it open there, so anybody can join. You can join and then become an admin, and then you're running the project. And I've left, and it's still going. So that's sort of keeping it open, keeping it transparent, and also you don't even need to join. It's on GitHub. Anybody can leave a comment. If you've got a GitHub account, you just leave a comment there, and we look at everything. Every comment that comes in, we look at. Anybody can propose a new project that we might want to work on. There's you just go on to GitHub, new issue, and then one of the options there is propose a new project. Whether it gets picked up or not depends on a few things. Partly, if we've got the people willing to work on it, and then if it gets approved by the admins, and then we'll get some traction. So that's what we're trying to do differently, and make it a more sort of community-led project, because the community is very, very strong, and it's sort of grown a lot, and there's a lot more collaboration that we're seeing in recent years, and a lot more open source projects that are coming up too.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm looking forward to seeing the progress you guys make. And I was going to ask about how people can get involved. So it's cool. If somebody really wants to be involved, they can apply to join. But it's nice just having that open GitHub where sort of things can get filed in that way too. So because there is, I think, a little bit of like, oh, I don't have the time to commit to actually joining something like this, but being able to sort of still have input or what have you can be a nice way to take that next step and get people involved that just want to sort of have input on certain things. So that's cool. I see someone saying that it's nice to have email as a skill set on their resume.
Yeah.
I have had people ask me about that actually previously, where they're like, I do have, I don't have a lot of experience, but I have done some stuff with it. Should I put it on my resume? And I'm like, well, do you want to continue doing it? Or, if you tell them that you can and they have anything like that, you're going to get that work. So do you want to have, is that something that you want to be working on or not? Just really quickly, a bit off topic, just thank you both Hector for the bits and Stony Eagle for the bits and the sub. Appreciate it very much. Thank you guys. Yeah, I've sort of gone through all of my questions and everything on where I see everything going with this. So as I said, I'm excited for it. I don't think we have any other questions, but I'll check really fast. We have no other questions on that front. So anybody really fast, if you do have a question, you can just throw it in the chat now before we finish things up. A few people just were asking, so it will be on YouTube eventually, probably a few weeks from now. Or you can, in the meantime, the replay be here on Twitch here. Yeah, perfect. So I think that's everything on my end. I don't see any other questions coming in. So I'm going to just really fast. I've dropped this in a few times. Whoops, wrong. See, I'm not very good at this. Push this button here, and you can get Mark's Twitter, his website, and the email markup.org. So you can check all of those out. If you're interested in this, and once the YouTube video does land, all the links that Mark mentioned and everything will be over there, and you can come to the Discord and probably find them there as well. If you missed any of the links or different resources that we talked about, I'll try and put them in the resources channel on the Discord.
I was just wondering if anybody's interested in seeing some of the more experimental stuff. I've got some things on my CodePen as well, which is nice. CodePen.io m_j_robbins. If anybody's interested in that as well, I've got some some CSS games and bits like that, which are fun if you're interested.
Awesome. Most of that stuff. Well, is that Wolfenstein 3D?
Yes.
Nice. Yes. Very cool.
It's most of that stuff will probably only work in Apple Mail. A lot of the sort of the more advanced stuff, but it's just built for fun. It's just to sort of show what can work in email. So yeah, if you send it to Outlook, nothing's going to work.
That's awesome. And one last question before we go. Is the Noobtacular's asking why we don't have a library that can fix a lot of the problems a little bit like jQuery did back in the day?
There are some good frameworks out there which will do a lot of the work for you. So one to definitely check out is Mazel, and another one is MJML, and they're both really good frameworks, and they are updated regularly by people who know email. So that's and I believe Mazel might have just built in something which references howtotarget.email, which is another open source project, which will tell you how to target different email clients with CSS. So you can use CSS, various selectors and workarounds to target a specific email client. And I believe that might be built into Mazel now, because it's built in with Tailwind, and I think there might be something there. I'm sure there'll be information on that somewhere. But it's Cosmin who built that does a lot of very, very cool stuff with it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for the extra resources there and all the resources that you shared with us. And good luck with the new email consortium. Really hope that it helps, at least influence things in a positive direction. And looking forward to seeing it grow from here. And yeah, is there anything else you want to share? We have your GitHub. I put your Twitter. Is there anything else before we go?
No, I think just anybody who wants to get involved with the EMC, get on the website. You can sign up there. Anybody who wants to get involved in the email, on Twitter, the hashtag emailgeeks, or the Slack, email.geeks.chat, or no, sorry, geeks. I can't remember what it is, but the Slack. I'll share it on the. Then get involved there, and but yeah, thanks a lot for listening. Thanks a lot for having me on, and any questions as well, I'm always on the Twitters.
Awesome, super. Yeah, so thanks a lot, and thanks everyone for hanging out, for all the questions. And looks like based on the chat that people were really enjoying the information you had for us. So yeah, thanks a lot, everybody.